that darn cardi Jew? They're making us ravenous look horrible.
If you've enjoyed this program, please click like and subscribe.
Shalom, and welcome again to another exciting edition of the Torah Watchman Show International, 501c3 company. Yes, hosted by none other than your humblest of hosts, Cardi Reb Yaar ben-Emmett. And I say Cardi Judaism with great pride. After so many years immersed in orthodoxy, just following the steps of people before me, not thinking about the origins of the traditions or the halakha that the rabbis have taught, thinking logically, not thinking pragmatically, and asking myself important questions. Where does this data source originate from? And then over a period of time, I found out there's so many things that I were taught for other rabbis, even though I have great respect for them, in yeshivas and things of this nature, yeshiva training. It came from the Talmud. That's why I'm a Cardi Jew, because I'm a Torah builder. I'm a Torah defender. And my whole family, and that's how I'm raising my daughter, to be Torah builders, defending the Torah. No plagiarism is allowed in my home against the holy written laws of God and the prophets. May we all say amen. Just had to get that out. Yes, this Torah Watchman video is about Parshah Vayak'hel. Usually in a Torah annual cycle, you would have this Parsha linked with another shorter Parsha. But because we have leap year, this Parsha has more honor than other years because it's delegated out separately for this Torah cycle. A lot of exciting things happen this week. We're rounding out Adar 1. We're going to Adar 2, and that's another anomaly there for leap year. We get an extra month to have to extend out the year and make sure that Holy Pesach is always in the spring. Unlike Ramadan, it could be snowing, it could be sunny and hot, or autumn leaves flying. They don't care about their calendar system the way we do. Because God said absolutely when we should have Pesach, and that is the milestone of all of our Hebrew calendar system, incidentally. Remember, we have Purim coming up, not too much longer. I hope you have your costumes ready. I hope you have your groggers ready to say that, every time you said the evil Malachite Haman, I hope you boo very loudly. Anyway, just having some fun. I hope everyone's been well. I've missed you since last week. Let's move forward. This Parsha, like I said before, is traditionally during a leap year, and it's very unique because you'll read it in contextual relationship and the scope of what it was intended in the very beginning. 29 Adar, the first month of Adar, is ending for the year of 5784. This is in the Gregorian calendar, the 9th of March. Okay? We're going to be reading again in the book of Shemot. That's Exodus, chapter 35, verse 1, through chapter 38, verse 20. Not too painfully long, okay? The name of the Parsha, Vayakhel, simply means, and he gathered. Now, what are we talking about? And he gathered, we're essentially talking about Moshe, the greatest of all prophets, the only human being that's ever had a face-to-face encounter with the divine creator and still lived to talk about it. He gathered all of Israel, all of tribal Israel, that was growing in mass and size of people and numbers, probably about 2 million people altogether at that time, plus or minus, I would say 100,000 plus or minus that kind of number. But anyway, God told Moshe to gather the people around so he could have a Torah teaching. And this is information that was given to Moshe on Mount Sinai after the second set of 10 commandments were brought down from that mountain. As a general overview, in Vayakhel, Moses gathers the Jews and relays to them all the details regarding the construction of the tabernacle. Remember, we talked about this the last few Parshah. Except now we're in the implementation stage. We had Aaron's rough blueprints and drafting that him and Moshe gathered on the mountain together briefly. And then you have more additional information that came from the mountain when Moshe went into the great synagogue and boot camp of Shamayim. We're talking about the construction of the tabernacle, its many vessels, its many artifacts, and supporting devices and things of this nature, and also the construction of the Mishkan, which would be placed in the tabernacle area. The tabernacle was rectangular. Mishkan was roughly square, more or less. Okay? So the actual construction repeats some of the details that we learned about in the previous parsha, but it's more detailed, more colorful. Okay? So you can consult Parshah Terumah for the proper context for this parsha. Okay? So you have Terumah was more high-level requirements. Now we're getting down to medium and lower level requirements for the actual construction effort of the tabernacle, which was rather complex and very detailed because it required so many skills and so many people inspired who did this out of the love of their heart for God. And chapter 35, I chose one verse out in the Sidra here. In verse 3, you shall not kindle a fire in any of your dwelling places on the Sabbath day. Okay? This word in Hebrew is interesting. It says, la ta va'aru, and then of course, Aish, which is fire. Cardi Jews, this is very important said right here. Why? Because back in the Middle Ages, I'd say 10th, 11th century was a golden age of Cardi Judaism when we had our high point there. Many people took it very verbatim that they had no fire whatsoever on Sabbath. No burning embers, nothing resembling Haish at all. They did not observe the Orthodox rule of modification, and that they didn't light a flame even before Shabbat to allow it to continue burning through Sabbath, okay? Because of a loose interpretation of this verse. And it says very clearly here, you should not kindle the fire. Folks, it simply means you should not ignite a flame, a new flame, like the entire universe came from fire, right? Came from a great Haish explosion of elements and chemicals and all kinds of things that became the universe as we know and love today, right? We are forbidden to create anything. And the very basic of all creation is the chemical reaction of when wood combusts with oxygen from a spark, okay? Now, I would say most Cardi Jews in the modern era now have adopted the procedure of the law of modification. Some of them, in some places, even light Shabbos candles. I like to light Shabbos candles. I don't look at them as Shabbos candles anymore, but I look at them as memorial lights. I think about people that are long gone, the loved ones, and when I like to light those candles before Shabbat, of course, and then they naturally burn out. If the wind blows, they go out. You don't relight them. You don't ignite that flame. You don't put another log on the fire either. You know, you let the embers burn down naturally. If you started something in motion, you hear about kinetic force and energy, you let it continue. Why am I making such a big deal about this verse? Because it is a point of confusion for Cardi Jews in the past, and it's also a bone of contention with orthodoxy as well, is that that's why people do not drive combustible automobiles on Sabbath, because of ha'esh, the fire. When you go in and turn on the key, it connects to your battery, and you have ignition and things of this nature, a spark, and then eventually the engine turns over, and you have the combustion process, which you literally have fire and things like that to ignite the gasoline. I don't want to get into all the mechanics of that. You know what I'm talking about. It's debatable today if you can get into a battery-operated car, if that's considered a violation of Malachot. I really don't think. Even in Jerusalem, you have scooters and things of this nature that's supposed to be powered on before Shabbat, and as soon as it's weight activated, so if you get on top of the scooter, it starts moving. So, to each their own, okay? There's nothing about electronic devices or anything like that in the Torah's halakha. There was not a problem for Israel during that time, because that was in the I would say the first Bronze Age or whatever, and they were not thinking about electronic devices. I look at electronic devices like a Shamas candle and Hanukkah, where it's a helper device that's doing work on behalf of you, so you don't have to physically interact with something. I don't see a big deal with that, but I love Jewish tradition, don't get me wrong. I love the stories, the legends and myths throughout the Talmud. It codifies a rich Jewish tradition, but it's not halakha. It's opinionated Judaism, and if it gets too far away from the beaten path of what is written to be true in the Torah and the prophets and the Tanakh and second writing, then that's where I break that thread. I said, you go this way, you go to your 50 Shades of Gray, and I'll stay with the absolute black and white truth of the Torah. That's the way Kardi minds work. The simplest, most logical interpretation of what those words in the Torah. And it's not very difficult to understand. It's actually written less than 8th grade education, which is jokingly in the United States. That's how the newspaper, when people used to read newspaper, like my grandfather, because a lot of people did not complete high school. They didn't graduate high school because they had to go back to the farm. Sorry about that tangent. Okay. In the first Aliyah, on the day that Moshe descended from Mount Sinai, the second tablets, after successfully securing atonement for the sin of the golden calf. This is the overarching guilt, a sin guilt that was above every Jew that had either knew someone had participated in that adultery, in that insurrection against God, or was part of that storyline anyway. A lot of people died, 3,000 people died or more, and I think there was additional plagues and things of that nature. But it essentially wiped out the rebellion of Israel during that time. I was talking to a friend, I want to cover this quickly. That shofar blast on the mountain, it was more than just sound. It was a spiritual shofar, okay? I have a shofar in my home from Israel, from a ram's horn, but this shofar was different. This shofar was touched by God, by the finger of God. And the Archangel Gabriel, many people think that Archangel Gabriel blew that shofar. That shofar, when it was heard, if you didn't cover your ears and go, na, 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 this actually changed at a quantum level your nefesh from B'nai Noach to B'nai Yehudim. So your nefesh Yehudim was actually created for the first time. And every single Torah scholar today will say that we were roughly Hebrews by race and ethnicity, but we were a monotheistic nation of B'nai Noahites, as is called today, thanks to the Ramban, for his definitions of that. But when they countered the Torah and they heard the words of Yehovah Elah Kam Imat on that great mountain, there were some people who were too afraid to even hear the sound. In fact, they told Moses, we don't want to hear this. We want anything to do with this. This is your God. Well, we're afraid of this. We don't want anything to do with it. And they were literally, I don't know this to be true, but the people that sinned, the great sin, and created the golden calf. And even some of the Levites, they died in the aftermath too. Don't think they were above reproach, all of them, because without the help of the Levites, the other Jews, the other tribal Jews at that time, or non-Jews and mixed with Egyptians and Phoenicians, whoever was there, even some of the firstborn were there that sinned a great sin there too. I believe these people put their hands over their ears when that shofar blast, because the shofar would not play its beautiful musical tones and oscillation forever. Even though when it blew at that time, I believe it is still blowing through space-time today. This is why so many people are leaving their paganism, leaving their other religious denomination behind, and becoming ben-Emmett. You see this happening, and folks, this is exciting times we live in the Mashiach. This is Bible prophecy. Okay, so the primary purpose of this assembly was to inform the Jews of Jehovah's desire for a sanctuary to be constructed. Excuse me, important note here. If the Jewish people were not forgiven by God, then God would not enjoin himself to be with the people in the tabernacle. The tabernacle in Mishkan was a mobile place of worship apart from Mount Sinai, which was a fixed mountain in place. God did not want to be there enthroned forever, and the Jews just to drift around the mountain and be a helicopter parent. God wanted the people to move forward and learn the Torah and mature spiritually and grow stronger militarily and be more confident in their faith and trust in the Lord their God, okay? But God forgave these people. They had the Yom Kippur, and they actually were so happy to all contribute at half shekel, from the census and everything else, the last Parshah, to contribute to the construction effort of that beautiful tabernacle / Mishkan and everything else that went in it. The menorah, the altar of incense, the elevation altar, the Ark of the Covenant, all these things, the vessels, the copper bowls, and things of this nature, even the knives that were used for animal sacrifices, utensils, anything that was interacting within that sphere that God was touching quantumly had to be cleansed and perfect. It came from the contribution of the people. Remember, during the golden calf incident, had instructed everyone, women or some men had earrings too, remove all the gold and jewelry and everything else and bring it to the melting pot and create this monstrous idol. Well, that idol was melted back down in its raw form of the gold, okay? And it was stored off maybe in bricks or something, I don't know. But there was other gold and treasure that was left over after the aftermath of the golden calf. And everyone had a tribute from Egypt that they brought with them, and they had their own private gold cash or silver or copper or bronze or whatever those metals were. They had that at that time as future temple treasury. Okay? The primary purpose of the assembly was to inform the Jews of Jehovah's desire for a sanctuary to be constructed. He began, however, with a brief reminder regarding the observance of Shabbat, which is the most important of all holidays. Everything centers around Shabbat. Everything centers around Kodesh Sabbath. It does. Without the seventh day of rest and consolation, introspection, and things of this nature, nothing else would really matter. Because it's the end of God's creative process of the universe, the heavens, earth and heavens and universe. And it's very important that we return back to the basics and just have a hallowed time in our lives. We get away from the toxicity of the world, and then we allow God to come into our homes, the Queen of Shabbat per se, and enjoying our home and a nice festive meal and learning about the Torah and talking about other Sabbaths in the past and talking about family histories and things of this nature, maybe visiting friends and loved ones as well. Okay? It's a happy family time Sabbath. That's why it's so critically important that you don't do any work on that day, namely the ignition of Haish. Followed by a description of the materials needed to construct the tabernacle and a list of vessels. So they had inventory, a list of everything they needed. And this list was pending before in the previous Parshah. It was actually written down. I'm sure there was inventory controls and management that was going on before Moshe went to Mount Sinai to get the first set of 10 Commandments. The Levites were managing this process to get everything together for the future tabernacle. Because the commander intent was established at that time that God would want a tabernacle in which to indwell with the Jewish people, because it was very unique compared to the other Hebrew nations around them. Chapter 35, verse 22, the event came with the women. Every generous-hearted person brought bracelets and earrings and rings and buckles, all kinds of golden objects, and every man who waved a waving of gold to Jehovah Elohim. Gold to Jehovah Elohim as a tribute of saying, thank you for my Yom Kippur. Thank you for forgiving me and not wiping me out utterly. Thank you. Thank you. So in the second Aliyah, the men and women came forward and they gave from the bottom of heart all the materials that Moshe had enumerated and said, I need, etc., 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 to build the tabernacle, to build the Mishkan, to build the holy of holy artifacts and things of this nature, okay? Chapter 36 in the third Aliyah, verse 1, I love this verse also. Two honored gentlemen, very righteous mentions of men, Bezalel and Aholiab, and every wise-hearted man into whom God had imbued wisdom and insight to know how to do this complex project, okay, shall do all the work of service the holy according to all the Lord commanded. So these two gentlemen were actually like project managers or foremen, okay? They're bosses, and they pretty much were skilled. They've done this before. Maybe they were master artisans in Egypt with the statues for the Pharaoh and things. I don't know. But they had a heart that really touched God so much that their names are written in the Torah. There's so many people that did such wonderful work in building the tabernacle Mishkan. Their names are not here. But these two gentlemen are. And it's almost prophetic in scope. Why? Because they heard God's voice. And they did what God asked them to do. And they obeyed God's word. And they were great, wonderful witnesses and motivated the workforce needed to build the tabernacle and Mishkan. Just like in King Solomon's time, when a young man building the temple of God, he had to motivate people. He had to hire foremen and artisans and people like that. He sent people all the way to Lebanon to cut down cedar trees and things of this nature. Very similar effort in the motivation of heart and soul to get the work done for God, because they love the Lord with all their heart. That's why their names are here. Wouldn't it be amazing if people were talking about us in the same context 3,500 years ago? In the future, it would be phenomenal that you were that precious to God and you were a friend of God, to be mentioned in that way, okay? Third Aliyah, Moshe announces Jehovah's choice of these men to serve as foreman of the tabernacle construction project, and he transfers them to get all the donated materials, okay? They probably had donkey cart after donkey cart after donkey cart from each of the 12 tribes, bringing all these artifacts that were donated. Essentially, everyone emptied their coffers. If they had treasure hidden in their tent, well, that's the least they could do, because the other evil people took that treasure that belonged to God and built that golden calf idol, okay? So they were making amends. Like I told you before, as Ezekiel chapter 18, 20 to 21, 22, 23 talks about making amends for your sins and to have a contrite spirit and asking and begging for forgiveness on your face before God. And God, by his own holy word, has to forgive you of your sin, okay? people, however, continued donating generously. And this is you see about in my town, in Kent Mill, you see people from time to time bringing boxes and cases of food and other clothes and things like that for the needy, for charity and things like this. And the cars just come and come and come all day long when they have a fund drive like that. This is what it reminds me of, that people just gave and gave and gave until they didn't have anything else. Okay? There was no hoarding of gold. People gave everything to the temple treasury, as I like to call it. Okay? So the craftspeople report to Moshe that they have more than enough materials to complete their task, causing Moshe to issue a proclamation requesting everyone to cease donating materials. He said, well, I have enough materials now, so thank you so much. I'll let you know if we need anything else. Okay? In Exodus 36, leading up to the fourth Aliyah, I like to read verse 8. Then all the wise-hearted people and the performers of the work made the Mishkan out of 10 curtains consisting of twisted fine linen, blue, purple, and crimson wool, like the picture behind me. A cherubim designed the work of the master weaver. He made them. So in the Mishkan, that very colorful purple, red, blue, and other colors like that, Takash hides and everything else, they had embroidered on the sides angelic entities. And it's just the most beautiful thing you could ever imagine. And I'm going to show you pictures back here as I do the video. Now, fourth Aliyah, the craftsmen actually do the work. So you probably heard a lot of hammering. You probably heard some sawing. You probably heard a lot of talking. Maybe people hurt their thumb. Maybe they said something they shouldn't. But, people were working like a chain gang, but they were happy, okay? I imagine there was a lot of singing of hymns, too. I imagine it was a very happy time because people saw that was coming up from the ground, from nothing, from all the materials are given, not a golden calf of adultery, but a beautiful temple in which God's nefesh would leave that mountain and indwell with the Jewish people no matter where they went, from generation, door of a door, right? Okay? Chapter 36 and verse 20, and he made planks for the Mishkan of acacia wood upright. I'll show you a picture here of acacia wood I have in my home. It's like a beautiful bowl used for salads and other things nature. Acacia wood was used predominantly for the tabernacle in the desert or tribal Israel, ancient tribal Israel, simply because it was a prevalent wood. The wood framework and architecture for King Solomon Temple, however, was cedar, because cedar was available from Lebanon. I thought that was interesting. Chapter 37, Bezalel made the ark of acacia wood 2.5 cubits long, okay? 1.5 cubits wide and 1.5 cubits high, okay? And I'll have these measurements for you as well. In the fifth Aliyah, the construction continued. In this Aliyah, the craftspeople constructed the tabernacle, the wall panels, their sockets, the curtains, which were covered the entrance into the sanctuary, and which separated the Holy of Holies from the rest of the sanctuary. Remember, only the Kohen Gadol, namely Aaron, and his sons and grandson, were allowed once a year on Yom Kippur to actually go in the Holy of Holies. So there was a curtain there, a veil, a boundary per se, that would not be passed through until God commanded it. Okay? Because in the Holy of Holies, you have the ark, you have the showbread table, and you have those holy vessels there. Okay? So also in chapter 37, verse 19, and it says, and he made a menorah of pure gold. He hammered work. He made the menorah. Its base, its stem, its goblets, its knobs, and flowers were all one piece. You heard me right. So they had to create a special mode to pour the gold and the other metals that went with the gold. If you just have gold itself, it's too soft and it would not stay together correctly. So they probably add some other metals with that. I'm not sure what. Even today, you have 24 karat gold, but there's always something added to it because it's a soft metal. But they had to build a mold for the complete thing. There was no soldering, there's no welding. The branches of the candelabra was one complete piece. That was not easy to do. This is something that God gave Moshe in his mind that he dreamed about and saw visually, virtually on top of the mountain. So in 6 Aliyah, the Aliyah describes the construction of the menorah, and we like to refer to it as a candelabra. I'll show you pictures here, several segues here, pictures of a different kind of menorah. We're not quite sure of the exact design. Most people think it's more of a U. It could be a V. I don't know. That's not really critically important, but it had 7 branches, and it was known as a candelabra because it had multiple candle holders, per se. Okay? And it actually resembled an olive tree. It's actually, it had oil going all through the branches, virgin oil for burning at the top of each branch. Okay? So in chapter 38 in the 6th Aliyah, verse 8, and they made a wash stand of copper and its base of copper from the mirrors of the women who had set up the legions, who congregated at the entrance of the tent of meeting. Now, yeah, you heard me right. Copper, they didn't have glass, they didn't have aluminum. They had brass that they used for mirrors. Okay, women like to look good for the husband, whatever. But a lot of these things were donated and then heated up, melted, put it out into the correct vessel. Something scientific about copper that it took hundreds of years, and not thousands of years, to discover. Even the recent COVID pandemic, copper was found out that it was antiviral by its atomic structure. Literally, it ripped apart the COVID molecule, the electron valence bands, and everything else at an atomic level, ripped it apart because of the unique way that the electrons and everything else of the element of copper interacts with viruses and bacterium. Fascinating in the Middle Ages when they had the Black Death, the plagues, and things of this nature. Many thousands of people dying throughout Europe. But, people that were not dying so readily were the coppersmiths. And they're literally, when you work with copper continually and you're metallurgist, you have copper dust on your face and things of this nature all over your hand. Maybe you're breathing in some of the dust, so you're touching copper continually. They were immunized against these viruses and germs. And there's no wonder why God chose copper for the cleansing of the hands and feet and everything else. And to this day, when we have Natalat Yadayim, when we wash our hands before we eat that tasty hametz, the challah, or we wash some in some shuls, you go there and you wash your hands ceremonially and say a prayer before you even go into the main sanctuary. But this tradition goes all the way back to the temple time. The reason is ingenious. How can people make this up? It is 3,500 years old, approximately, in which God constructed Moshe. I want copper to be used for the vessels to wash your hands and feet and for cleansing prayers and things of that nature. I thought that was interesting. In fact, I even talked to my wife before. If we ever replace the sink and drains in our kitchen, I'll probably replace them with copper. I even have a copper cylinder, which I put my umbrellas and all that. And I joked about it. I bought it during COVID because every time you touch it, it essentially shorts out any viruses or bacteria on your fingers. If you don't believe me, go and Google it or Bing it or Yahoo it, okay? I'm sorry. This is something that's needful to show you how amazing the Torah is when it talks about methods and techniques that are pure science, that it took thousands of years for so-called enlightenment to figure out, like washing your hand with soap after you deliver a child will contribute to higher rates of healthy childbirths. Yeah, it wasn't until the 1800s until that was actually written down. Okay? I don't want to get into that anymore, but it's very fascinating. The seventh aliyah, the tabernacle construction, is capped off with the construction of the outer altar. The copper was used predominantly for washing hands. The mesh curtains which surrounded the tabernacle courtyard, and the beams and hooks which anchor them. A picture's worth 1,000 words. So please, when I teach this Torah Parsha, look at the pictures transitioning behind me in the proper context. I try to align the images to be contextually relevant because, you may get bored looking at this handsome Jew throughout the whole video sequence. So I try to throw eye candy up here for you. Okay, this wraps up the Parsha. It's not too long, not too painfully long, and it's probably sufficiently long for most people's attention span. Okay? We have a special matar because this weekend is going to be Rosh Chodesh for the beginning of Adar 2. Oh, I told you, the leap year. If you want to look at that, we'll go back to Terumah, I believe, chapter 30 and verse 13, and it talks about the census. You had to have the census for the half shekel offering to pay for anything else they did not have in the inventory list, to barter and trade from other peoples there, to especially the spices that went in the incense altar. And by the way, something else I learned about spices in our Siddur, even to this day, in most Orthodox and Sephardi Siddurs, they say count on your fingers 11 spices. I've done this ad nauseum. In fact, I bought a lot of these spices in my home and put them in a infuser. I like to smell that during Sabbath, and I always told you this, but that's only 4 spices in the Torah. And it says in the commentary, but Rabbi said, they believe there's actually 4 men 11. I don't know. I don't want to argue that. But when God gives you an absolute mandate, a commandment, a halakha, you better get it right. You better get it right because you're disobeying God and you're making up something else. God's Torah is perfect, is divine, is true, just as the Emmett as his name, Jehovah, Elahakam, and he doesn't need any help to refine his Torah any further. Remember, to add or subtract from the Holy Torah is an abomination. I didn't say that. Moshe said that as inspired by his holy God. Okay? So in chapter 30 and verse 13, we're talking about the half shekel offering. You probably remember me talking about that. 20 gerahs equal to 1 shekel, half a so-called tzlach, a shekel shall be an offering to the Lord. Okay? I'll show you some coins, some old coins that some archaeologists found in old Jerusalem. Okay? The Haftarah is interesting in itself. It's in 2 Kings chapter 11, verse 17 to chapter 12, verse 17. And then we hop over to the prophet Shemuel 1, chapter 20, verse 18, and Shemuel 1, 20, and 42. Why this elaboration? I'll explain it quickly. Okay, 2 Kings 11, here's one verse. And these are 2 righteous kings. That's why I want to mention them. Jehoiada enacted the covenant between the Lord and between the king and between the people. This is actually, he obeyed the 10 Commandments. 5 for the interpersonal relationships of your fellow man and women. And then 5 for your interpersonal relationship with your divine God. Essentially, through blessings and admonishments and things of this nature. We have, I always talked about common law and you have divine law. And God recognized there was many, many variants of common law. But God's law is above man's law. And so this holy king actually kept and obeyed the commandments and implemented them as well. And between his people. And it taught them the mitzvahs too. And 2 Kings 12, verse 2, the son of Jehoiada, Joash, became king in the 7th year of Jehu, and he reigned in Jerusalem for 40 years. And his mother's name was Zebiah from Beersheba. Okay? And Shemuel or Samuel 1, chapter 20, verse 18, And John, verse is read in our Haftarahs every single time we have a Rosh Chodesh or the beginning of a new Hebrew month. Jonathan said to him, tomorrow is a new moon, and you will be remembered, for your seat will be vacant. Jonathan was talking to his best friend and buddy and pal, the future King David. Okay? I hope you enjoyed this Parsha. I enjoyed doing the research and the due diligence and getting this video done for you on time. It takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of special effects, too, to do the Torah Watchman show in the way that you deserve to be presented to you, okay? I don't believe in doing any Class B, Class C, European old cheap movies for you, and all the low quality stuff. I have bought a lot of software, spent a lot of money, and do a lot of investments in my company to give you the best quality Torah show that money cannot buy, because I don't charge anything. You pay me by subscribing and sharing all the knowledge and wealth and love and truth of everyone that's willing to hear it. Remember, I'm a lighthouse on a hill. I'm not politically correct. I'm the elephant in the room, and I will shoot from the hip every time. If I'm wrong about anything, I will retract it. And I will also quote always back to the Torah and the prophets and the sacred writing. And if I go out on a tangent with Ramban or Rashi just for a little bit of elaboration and things like that, I will say this is opinionated and this is objective. Remember, God is objective, His prophets are objective, rabbis and sages, God bless them, are always subjective because they're men. And they're not called by God to represent the children of Israel. I'm sorry to say that, but it is true. Anyway, Rabbi Ben-Emmett signing out to the next time. I wish you all the love for the B'nai Noach out there, for all the Jews out there, Am Israel High. I hope to go to Israel very soon. I may go to Israel next month. I'll keep you posted on that schedule if it works out. I had to renew my passport. I want to visit with some of the survivors of the victims of October 7th and just tell them and reassure them that American Jews love them very much and they're always in our prayers. We have not forgotten about them. But anyway, until next time, Shalom Aleichem. I will see you real soon.